and welcome to Game On, Record Sports Rapid Fire Hot Take podcast. At this time of year, the gaffer has rotated things, and just like Liam Kelly and VG Sinisalo, it's time for the deputies to show their worth. My name is Fraser Clarke, he is Graeme Young, and we'll have just 120 seconds to dissect all the big talking points from another packed week in sport, and with a huge weekend of Scottish Cup action ahead. Graeme, 120 seconds, just 60 seconds each. I hope you've packed some of your hottest takes ready for today.
Ready to go.
Excellent. That is the confident sort of answer I was hoping for. Well, we'll kick things right off by looking back on last night as Rangers lost to Athletic Bilbao to exit the Europa League. That means it is decision time. Will Barry Ferguson be back? Does he deserve to be?
Well, the question's twofold, doesn't it? It felt quite final, his answer, when he spoke to the media just after the game. But if it's about deserve, I think there's a case to be made. And I know that case is probably not as strong in some quarters, but I think that he's shown enough, and with the takeover still not completed, the idea that when he arrived on a temporary basis, I think it was beyond logic that he would get the chance, but he does fit what Rangers are about. Like, he gets the game, and even last night, one thing I know he's been criticised for the tactical change. Inciala coming on later than probably could have come on in the first half. He was thinking outside the box, and I think there's plenty to be said about that. I think there's enough about what he did last night, what he's been able to do, pinpointing the flaws in this Rangers team, that if there is a make way or a temporary boss, he would fit the profile. Do you think he...
The big thing that struck me from last night is I think the 49ers will be breathing a bit of a sigh of relief, because I think if he had won them the Europa League, he would have to be appointed. Absolutely, no doubt, no question about it in my mind.
Roberto Di Matteo rule.
Exactly. You experience success in Europe, that's it. He has to be appointed. Club legend, European trophy, there's no competition. I think there have been warning signs, and let's be honest, 4 wins from 10 matches, that's not good enough as a Rangers manager. Even bump up to 6 wins from 10 matches, it's still not really good enough. Even in some of those games, Fenerbahce away, they were phenomenal. Unbelievable performance. Celtic at Parkhead, I think they played them off the park for large spells of the game. Those 2 games, they almost lost the second leg against Fenerbahce, and they almost left Parkhead with just a point. I think those have to be warning signs. What was it they were called? The staunch Avengers. They got fans right back on side. I think everyone connected to Rangers wants it to be a success, but I think we've seen maybe why Barry Ferguson hasn't been appointed Rangers manager before now. And like you say, he's not afraid of the big calls, but how many of those big calls have paid off, and how often can you keep doing it? Because to me, it looks like a manager who's maybe getting his starting 11 wrong and then having to rectify it.
That's fair. And I think the one point with Barry is this idea that he gets kept around. I think he's shown one thing is that he is either a manager or nothing, and he'll head back to ambassador role if he's not. So the other big issue last night, a seismic game for Rangers, and rightfully so. There was real fury over the penalty that wasn't in the first half. Cyril Dessers, his shirt nearly stretched the whole pitch of the San Mamés, and he was rightfully angry. What do you think is do you owe Rangers apology? Is this one of these situations where it's so obviously wrong, there needs to be holding their hands up?
I think there needs to be an explanation, doesn't there? There needs to be a reason given for why it wasn't. Now, this affected the game massively for 2 reasons for me. Firstly, obviously, because it should have been a penalty for Rangers. They score it, that fits beautifully into the tactics that they're trying to play to get that 1-0 away win, like the true Walter Smith ball, if you will. But also because Dessers got frustrated. He picked up a cheap booking, and ultimately it nullified him for the rest of the game because he knew he couldn't risk, going up for a header, mistiming it, clattering someone and picking up that second booking. So almost completely nullified that threat that he had. And for all his criticisms, I thought he'd started the game relatively well. He had that run where he was potentially fouled on the edge of the box. He obviously then had the penalty incident, and he lost his cool. So I think they deserve an explanation, if not an apology. The only 2 other aspects that would come into it for me would be an apology really counts for nothing. They're out, so you can stick your apology. That's what I'd be thinking if I was a Rangers fan. And the second thing would be that it's almost had a more seismic impact on the game than not just getting the penalty, because it's nullified that threat that Dessers had.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think the other element as well is it was really surprising that the referee wasn't called to the monitor just to make that call. And you see in the aftermath as well, this is obviously pundits will always be aghast and calling out, but the ex-referees and Alan McCoy's made the point that Howard Webb was in the building last night, and you maybe wonder, is Howard Webb, who is Premier League, has he been going to be tasked with a bigger role? That's quite an interesting one for him to be in the stadium. Don't think he's always sightseeing midweek for European games. I think that it's the type of incident you can see that will be flagged up in years to come as like this is the one you don't make. And the image is something else that's like something that a tabloid stream as a strip. It's almost like Spider-Man's web going across the whole pitch. So I think answers will need to be found, and I think Rangers deserve them.
The other thing that I would say as well was I thought the ref was really lenient last night. So perhaps he could point to it and say, look, if that was in the middle of the park, I wouldn't have given it, because there was quite a few times, especially in European games, I was looking at tackles, challenges going in and going, that'll be a foul. Oh, he's played on. And I actually quite liked it because it let the game flow. So I do wonder if they do an explanation, if it might come out that actually it wouldn't have been given just because that's the referee's style. We will flick over to the other side of the city and we will talk about a man who is, he's had a season of two halves, I think you could say. Nicolas Kuhn, stick or twist? It's a massive question facing Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah, and I think it's important to caveat the fact this isn't twist on just form, it's time. But Celtic are the specialists of selling at the right time. Now, Dysmaid is the next one who's going to enter the kind of final part of his contract, but it's quite obvious that they would love to keep him around, or at least get him on a bumper contract, and then if suitors come. But for Kuhn, it's a bit more complex. I actually felt, I've been quite strong in this in the past, I thought he was actually better than advertised at the tail end of last season, and then that followed into a brilliant start. And I think me, as much as anyone's been shocked at the level he's playing at currently. And it's hard with Kuhn because when he's off, he's so off the pace. It's so obvious. He's weak in tackles. He likes that cut inside across the pitch, and it doesn't work. And I think he is. When you see again, it's back to the James Forrest. When James Forrest is there, he always come back in, and you get a level. And the truth is, Kuhn drops below the Forrest level, and then he can go to a level that James Forrest can't currently get to. I think they've got a big decision. I would be surprised if good level European teams would still be interested in paying good money, and then that gives you an option, because a striker will need to be. So it lets you still get Jota on the books, maybe a cheaper winger, and then you put more of the money in to get a central striker. What would you do if you were Brendan Rodgers on the Celtic board?
Is it wrong that the first thing that pops into my head when you were talking about an additional winger is Václav Černý? Could he, we spoke about Greg Taylor, could Černý be tempted to go the other way amongst all the kind of chat about trying to link Taylor with Rangers? I think Černý would actually improve Celtic. I think he'd be a good signing for them. But anyway.
And it wouldn't be very controversial either. That's a great thing as well.
Yeah, there'd be no controversy to that. No bother at all for him. This for me is when Brendan Rodgers earns his corn, and he needs to know Nicolas Kuhn's character. Is he a player who's going to respond better to a kick up the backside, or does he need an arm around him and almost like a DVD? Look how good you were at the start of the season. This is what we believe you can do. And I think we'll see that this weekend. Does he throw him in from the start at Hampden? And if he does, then I think you'll see that he's maybe the sort of player who needs an arm around him. If he benches him, tries to prove a point again, I think he's maybe somebody who needs a kick up the backside. And there might be no way back in terms of at Celtic if they just think, right, we'll cash in. We'll take the money while we can.
Okay. So next, and this is a big one this week, and this has been grinding my gears, cutting away tickets. Now, of all the hot topics in Scottish football, this is up there. It's bad for business, in my opinion. I really do feel that on a whim, you can just suddenly reduce allocation for away fans. It's a hard enough game, and I know St Mirren are a good example of a team that really committed to it, and it's worked for them. And they deserve kudos, just as a club. St Mirren deserve praise, everything they do, out with the top six, off the pitch as well. But this, with Aberdeen, for Hibs visit and Rangers visit Teessar Road, it just really feels that it's such a bad present off the back of, finally we've got Celtic and Rangers working again together, and I think that's important. That's, I think, top down, it just all goes from there. But we really need to move away from this. It's such a poor option in Scottish football where just on a whim you can suddenly, fans that think they've got an away day in the bag suddenly can't, and then that might turn that person off the game, like, oh well, didn't get it the last 2 years, now I'm not there. We need to find a way to stop this. We need legislation. How would you connect it? Legislation.
You're writing to the First Minister
exactly.
demanding this.
Well, you feel like that now.
It's funny, I can look at it, so as a Dumbarton fan, I've never experienced the situation where you simply cannot get away tickets, so maybe I can look at it on a kind of emotionless level. I suppose ultimately you're going to another club stadium, so they can decide who they want to let in or not. And if they would rather have an empty stand or rather pack it out with home fans, maybe they've got every right to do it. And I suppose they've got to look at it on a business level. What keeps our own fans happy? Like, they're the 18,000, 20,000 turning up every single week. So I can see why they do it. I think there needs to be the business plan for it to make sense. I think they need to have their own fans on side.
But that's the issue. That's the crux for me. We're Aberdeen. They're playing. They're on the rise. I'm just taking the game at Pittodrie, for instance, right? But then deep down that next season the rules might change, but they need to commit to that because they did it the year before. Don't quite sell out the home end and you leave the punters who are travelling up the road. There's got to be a real method to this. And I think that's the kind of stuff that the pettiness that still is rife in Scottish football when it suits.
Could it be a sign, though, of the strength of the league that clubs are prepared to A, turn people away, and B, their home gates are good enough so the league is so competitive at the moment that fans are almost being turned away? That's a nice problem to have.
Potentially, but in Scottish football, these recriminations always get a way of biting you in the backside, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the case with this.
We will move on before you take up the rest of this podcast on that. Well, that's how the rest of the day in the office is going to be spent, debating that one. And we will talk about a player that Celtic missed out on, and that is John McGinn. He had a starring role against PSG in the Champions League midweek, which even earned praise from L'Equipe, which is a fairly major bit of praise. Is Celtic missing out on John McGinn, the club's biggest ever transfer fumble?
Yes, just quickly on L'Equipe, they're the second harshest marker when it comes to player ratings after yourself.
After me, yes.
They're pretty sternness with those ones. So yeah, with John McGinn, it's a great example of a player. I think this is probably the Lennon Miller rule, where right now Lennon Miller's that next big Scottish midfield talent, and there's a level of cynicism. But the one that came in my head, it was a really good question, is Ivan Toney, and it's almost one of these sliding doors moments. So if he had signed, it would have been the year Celtic came miles short, couldn't win 10 in a row, and nothing would have changed. Tony wouldn't have fixed all that in one season. But what would have happened potentially, if Tony was there, he'd get second season in Glasgow, Ange Ball rocks into town, Hugo probably wouldn't have been signed, Tony could have filled his boots, and his career progression wouldn't have probably been dissimilar. But that was the one player I think Celtic have been in for in recent years who I know he's playing side, and the level for that year and a half at Brentford was staggeringly high, and I think it'd have been really interesting. I think it'd been perfect for Scottish football, that attack-minded style Celtic played. So Ivan Toney's the one that kind of jumped out at me. Who have you got in your head?
So if you're wanting to jump back a wee bit, then the first one that popped into my head was actually a player Celtic let go, and that's Andy Robertson as a youth team player. However, Andy Robertson being let go ultimately let Kieran Tierney come through. Now, I think it's fairly negligible. You can make an argument for either of them being the better player. They've both gone on to have phenomenal careers. They're both outstanding players. The thing that I would sort of jump back on is thinking about John McGinn. I'm going to get my own team in here. I saw John McGinn getting turned by Kevin Colley when he opened the scoring when we beat Hibs 3-2 in 2016. I never thought I would see John McGinn starting in the Champions League, scoring a screamer against PSG and being as good a player as he is. There's that old Tom English tweet, which you'll love that we've brought up. £1.5 million is not derisory. Possibly was a bit derisory, but I don't think anyone expected John McGinn to be as good as he has gone on to be. I mean, he's gone on to become a standout for Scotland, a standout in the English Premier League, and now a standout in Europe. I wouldn't have expected that 10 years ago.
No, that's fair. I think in his classic move of using his backside to keep the opposition at bay, it's translated well for him as well. So next on the agenda, Rory McIlroy. He's waited a long time to get complete the Grand Slam, win his 5th major. Anyone that's been watching him the last 2.5 years know he's been knocking on the door. That's him on 5. Where do you think he ends up now? How does the final chapter of the Rory McIlroy story finish?
So I'm absolutely torn on this. So I think there's 2 potential ways it goes. We know how hard he's worked for this. We know this is the one that he wanted. So does he now go, I'm playing with freedom. That's it. I've done everything I wanted. It takes the pressure right off and you can just enjoy it. And you know how much, if sports people are enjoying it, they're playing with confidence, how well that works. But then there's also the opposite aspect that goes, is the motivation now going to be at the same level? And again, you see that with so many sports people. This is what he has dedicated so much of his life to. What, the past 11 years or something? It's almost been tunnel vision. That's what I need to achieve. He's done it. Does he now take his foot off the gas a wee bit? I think the official question we were asked for was how many majors does he finish with? He might not get another one, or he could kick on and win another one this year. And I don't think either would be a surprise. So that's me sat right in the fence.
See, I think no, but I think he is going to do the business because if you just, the way he's been playing, he's found this groove. Those years, like the mid years between when the majors weren't even close for a long time, and his overall game was poor. He was breaking it down, like in Tiger Woods' post, his great run. Like I think he had that kind of almost delusional to try and rip up the hole, but now it's very solid. Even when he makes mistakes, he can get himself out with some of the best shots you'll ever see. Port Rush this year, I wouldn't be surprised. That seems almost preordained. He's got to do well there, and then he's got. I'll go for 8 by the time he's 40, and he'll get to 10 by the time he's 45 and call it a day. And that puts him exactly where he should be in the history of the game. He's not Tiger, he's not Jack, but he's of that elite level. He's better than Phil, Mickelson and others, but he's just a level above in his own category probably, and I think the Grand Slams will reflect that by the time he puts away the clubs.
I noticed as well this morning that the odds have been absolutely slashed. Now, I suppose that's natural after you win a major like that, but seeing the odds slashed did make me think, right, okay, they've clearly got a lot of belief. Bookies are never wrong.
Yeah. No, I think there's every chance. I think he's going to have a good year and good years to come, and it was proper emotional last week. And on another man who's on a mission of vengeance and revenge against his haters, Ange Postecoglou, who that's it. Will he laugh last at Tottenham? He's been on a personal crusade with his own supporters, but something's just turned, hasn't it? Like the fact that he's almost been emboldened by this new, like as they would say in wrestling, Ange just turned heel a bit, and now he's trying to find a sign off for Tottenham. Do you think he'll win the Europa League and ride off into the sunset?
I think he will. I think watching his interview last night had me believing. So last night we saw a different sort of Spurs. We saw, I think it was described on TNT as like the perfect European away performance. That's not very Ange ball. That's not what we expect from the kind of high octane Postecoglou style of play. You look at the teams that are left. Bodo, kind of have some bad memories there. Man United, Bilbao. There's no reason why Tottenham can't win it, despite how hopeless they've been in the league. Yeah. They've got good players coming back from injury. The defensive players coming back especially is going to be absolutely huge for them. I think on their day, they're probably the best side left in the competition. Do you trust them? No, I never trust them. But watching his post-match, listening to it, it sounds like the players are on board. I mean, he's certainly never doubted it. The fact that the club haven't sacked him, despite the fact that they are, 16th or something in the Premier League, suggests that they believe in him in Europe because that's the only reason they'd keep him there. So I think, based on last night, he's got me believing that he can do it.
Yeah. And the night up on Ange as well, is at times at Celtic, you like to keep his distance, but you also like to pull out a speech, like on any given Sunday, Al Pacino-style speech when it really mattered. I bet he had one last night. It felt everybody was on board. Do you know as well, it's probably a truce, isn't it? Listen, we'll walk away in the summer. Let's get Champions League football, a winner's medal. And they do the level of player they have compared to the other three teams. And that's crazy saying that with Man United, but it's just a different level. If they're on fire, they seem as good a bit. But again, Bodo, there's something about that. And that'd be very Ange as well. Bodo finding a way to kind of bust the Ange ball twice in different clubs and different levels. So I think there's challenges there. But Bilbao, for all they were convincing enough against Rangers, they lack that. They're not the 2012 Bilbao. They're not exciting, and I think that could, who knows, but we'll soon find out with Ange.
Talking about 2012 Athletic Bilbao and now talking about 2025 Hearts.
Summer.
Has Neil Critchley failed at Hearts is the big question that's getting put to us. Graeme, what is your take on Neil Critchley's tenure at Hearts?
Yeah, I hope this doesn't sound like fence sitting, but I do have a real air of sympathy for Neil Critchley. Points total's pretty good. He's lost the big games. And that ties into the fact, and I actually remember we're doing a piece in Steven Gerrard a couple of years ago. It was about people in his sphere, and Critchley always got a great name. Probably one of these elite coaches that if we went out to training ground at the Orium or wherever, you'd put on a session that would wow UEFA big hitters. But that's a coach. A manager would find a way to get a result against Motherwell. And that, I think, is his downfall. The games against Hibs, Hibs are more like Hearts now, aren't they? They've got this steely air, and I think Critchley will always be who he is. Tactically, he's always thinking, he's trying different things, but on a week-to-week basis, I think he's always primed to come up short. Do you think the end is near for him at Hearts?
I actually think he might be getting a bit of a hard time. Now, it's easy for me to say. I don't watch Hearts every week, but do you remember where they were when he came in? I think he had 2 points from the first 18 available. They then got 6 from the first 33 available. I remember watching them. It would have been round about Christmas playing Ross County on that absolute pudding of a pitch. And that's coming from a Dumbarton fan, by the way. Absolute pudding of a pitch where it finished 2-2. And I remember thinking, I think Hearts are going to go down this season. I think they're actually going to be relegated. Then they picked up. And I actually, when I think my first appearance on Game On, I said, they'll get the top 6. They'll comfortably get the top 6. Obviously, they've fallen just short. I think right now, you would say he's getting pass marks. He's got them safe from relegation. That's the first objective. Now, if he can win the Scottish Cup or something, that might be what gets him to that next level, or even get them to the final, might just help him come on a wee bit. I think where he's maybe a victim is that, and not meant in a disparaging way, he just isn't that impressive. He doesn't have an aura about him. He's not got that steely sort of David Gray aura, determination, glare about him. And he just sometimes looks a bit like a rabbit caught in the headlights. But I actually think he's done reasonably well, all things considered, considering what he inherited when he went in.
That's fair. There is no Critchley, is it? It's just, it's all very. He seems like a good guy, but I think that is the issue. I think long term, I think he deserves a decent amount of credit for. I like the free strikers thing he tries. Why not? Listen, get players on the pitch. Sometimes it's logic as well, and that turns us nicely as well. And back to pressing matters for Hearts. It's Scottish Cup semi-final weekend. One of the highlights of the Scottish calendar, sport calendar, and we've got two pretty interesting games for different reasons. We've got Hearts versus Aberdeen. Both teams aren't perfect, as we kind of touched upon with Hearts, and we know with Aberdeen as well. And then Celtic versus St Johnstone. St Johnstone beat Celtic 2 weeks ago, played one of the best games of the season. And Valkyrie for all. I think he deserves great credit. They're stuck in relegation mire, but he's really taken the cup seriously all season. Quickly, how do you think these two games will play out? And a score prediction for both.
Right, I think Celtic. I don't see Celtic falling to St Johnstone again. And I think Celtic at Hampden, game face on. They were so good against Kilmarnock. I think they'll win 3-0. I think they'll go 1-0 up just before half time. They'll get a second early in the second half, and they'll seal it with a sub scoring in injury time. And you can all quote me on that when that comes back. Hearts Aberdeen excites me. I think that has the potential to be a really, really good game.
And it's a surprisingly rare treat at Hampden. It's not been commonplace in recent years as well.
Yeah, and not having one side of the Old Firm on it and that sort of thing as well. Two massive clubs. I think that could be a really good game. In my head, I've got 2-2 and it goes to penalties. That's how I'm anticipating. Have you got as much excitement and as much of a clear vision of how this is going to go as I do?
Well, if Neil Critchley's watching, he's turned off at my last answer. Come back, Neil, all's forgiven, because I think Hearts will win this game. I feel with Aberdeen, it's almost been like, and they're improving, but you've seen parts. I find Aberdeen annoyingly patchy every time I watch them. They're quite passive. They don't play full games, as we saw last week against Rangers. And I think that will be to their detriment against Hearts, who aren't perfect. But I just think they'll have enough after a week to forget. Fans are raging. Andrew McKinley's coming out and hands up, mea culpa, like this isn't good enough. I think they'll have too much for Aberdeen, who, for all Jimmy Tilleen's shown some signs of progress, I don't think it's enough. I actually think they'll win convincingly. Hearts 3-1. And the other semi-final, I actually think it'll be a good game. Celtic concede goals at Hampden. Recently it's been a bit more, but Brendan Rodgers doesn't lose at Hampden. I'll go 2-1 or 3-2 in a pretty competitive game, surprisingly. A little-known striker dies in my head, that might make the difference in the end. But I think they'll be both good games. I think the way, again, another bugbear, and this is something that needs brought up, they should be on flip days. Celtic should be playing on the Saturday. Hearts Aberdeen showcase Sunday game, and it's terrible it's not the case.
I totally agree with that. Right, we will finish off by talking about something slightly different, but also on the biggest stage in the sport. Can John Higgins win at the Crucible again? It is the World Snooker Championship. It gets underway tomorrow. Will we have a Scottish winner?
It'd be brilliant. The scary thing, I remember when he won his first one as well. And it doesn't even feel that long ago. He's had a remarkable career. The game last year against Selby is arguably the best non-final Crucible game I've ever watched. It was magic. And why not? Do you know that way? There's no reason. The famous Ronnie O'Sullivan interview where he callously slammed the youngsters coming through. Does bear fruit. There isn't a great level at times. You always feel if you can manoeuvre the first couple of rounds, you can stay in it. So do you know what? I'm going all in. John Higgins to win. Why not?
I think he could. I think that there's the curse of winning the Tour Championship beforehand, that nobody ever wins the Championship before and then goes on to success at the Crucible. That Mark's just playing his mind a wee bit. Mark Selby's my man. I fancy him for it. However, you look at Higgins' early draw. He's got Joe O'Connor in the first round. He beat him in the World Open relatively comfortably, 10-6, just a couple of months ago. Then the winner of Zhao Guodong and Matthew Selt, another decent draw. And then either Williams, Vifai, Wu Yiza or Barry Hawkins. Again, good players. Not maybe at the elite level that John Higgins is at. So I don't see why not. And the long games suit him. We know that. And I think it was really interesting. It's up on the Daily Record website if anyone wants to read it. Alan McManus making a few comments around John Higgins now kind of identifying his own weaknesses. And if you're confident enough to know your own weaknesses and play around them, that's a great place to be in as a player. So I don't see any reason why not. I just think that Mark Selby is probably the man to beat, just with how good tactically he is, how good his safety play is. And I know that Higgins beat him in the final at the Tour Championship, but I can't. I've said it since the start of this year. I just think Selby is the man for the Crucible.
Humour me that now just both are on 4 world titles each.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So this would be a defining one for both career. And the thing with Mark Selby in his defence, he's criminally underrated. He's just not got that celebrity that Higgins, Williams, O'Sullivan have, and a brilliant player as well. Kind of won those titles in the quiet era, Snooker, didn't he?
Yeah, it's like not being a member of the class of '92 kind of counts against you, and it's almost if it wasn't for the class of '92. we'd all be talking about Mark Selby so much, but because you had the guys, the icons that came before him, he's almost fallen by the wayside a wee bit. Well, thank you all for listening and watching this week's episode of Game On. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you like what you hear, why not leave us a review or a comment, but only if it's a nice one. You can tune in next week to find out if either of us have done enough to claim that number 1 jersey for a second week in a row. But for us, for now, thank you very much.
Thank you.